Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Hack, and in this video, you're checking out the easiest DPS build by far for New World. This is the MAULER build. This brutal melee fighter uses Great Axe combined with Hatchet for absolutely insane damage potential. Plus, it's super easy to get started with right at the beginning of the game, and can carry you all the way till endgame if you want. We'll be covering all the recommended skills, passives, gear, attributes, and much more coming up next. So let's get started. All right, let's start off by talking about attributes on this easy DPS build. And honestly, it doesn't get much easier than this. Your primary attribute on this build is going to be Strength, and that's because Strength in New World is going to be the main melee weapon attribute for things like Great Axe, Hatchet, many more melee weapons use this as the primary stat. And you also get some really good passives as you increase your total value of Strength on your build. You get things like stronger light attacks, stronger heavy attacks, bonus damage to stunned or slowed enemies. And if you actually max this out near 300 strength, you'll get full grit on all of your light and heavy attacks, basically making you unstoppable on this setup. So strength will definitely be the main attribute you want to be putting your points into, and you want to be looking out for those gear pieces that have strength as a primary stat as well. Now, as far as secondary attributes you might want to think about getting, some Constitution is always good. You want to hit that baseline of at least 50 Constitution to make your potions heal you for 20% more health. This is very helpful in both solo and group content to make those potions as effective as possible. Finally, while not ideal, Dexterity is also a secondary bonus stat for the Hatchet on this build. That means while it's not as good as Strength, you will get some benefit on your Hatchet damage if you have some additional Dexterity on your build. So if you can find something that has like Strength and Dex combined, that's going to be useful in the short term. Moving right along to consumables on this build, let's talk food first. Basic rations is going to be fine to start the game off. You can craft these at a camp or in your local settlement. Make sure you have these on your character at all times for the passive health regeneration. Also, don't forget, if you get into trouble, you can consume another bite of food, and that's going to give you some extra health regeneration for about 20 seconds or so, as long as you're not taking damage. Now, there is attribute buff food available as well through the crafting system. You'll need a bit higher cooking skill to make that work, so keep an eye out for that if you're interested. And then finally, in terms of potions, make sure you always have health potions on your character at all times as well. You can start off with the weak health potions, which are fairly easy to make, but you'll want to upgrade those eventually to the common and then the strong health potions. Remember we talked about that passive? With at least 50 Constitution, your potions healed for 20% more. Those strong health potions, easily going to heal you over 1,000 health if you need it in an emergency. It's really, really useful to have those. All right, let's jump into the equipment next, talking about weapons and armor on this easy DPS setup. And as far as the armor goes, there's a couple ways you can run this. Number one would be as a light build. And the benefit of light is you just get the most damage possible. You get 20% bonus damage done, but you also get the lowest resistances. Now for me, many times I prefer to use a medium equip load, and that just means I have slightly less damage. So I have 10% damage instead of 20%, but my armor ratings are much higher. So, I mean, in the end, it's really up to you. I think if you have like a really good tank and a really strong group composition, you can definitely get away with light to maximize your DPS, but if you're joining a little bit more random groups, maybe medium will be the best way to go just for the extra protection. And for that, a really easy set to get early on is this Soldier's set, because this gives you the max strength, which we talked about already, the attributes. Strength equals damage for us. Plus we got the heavy armor piece there, so we get the bonus elemental and physical resistances. So this is an awesome way to go. Now I actually have the Soldier pieces in medium for the rest of the build. And these pieces, again, they're pretty random. You can get them from enemy drops out in the world, but the best thing to do is just look on the trader and try to find these pieces with Soldier in the title, because those have the most strength possible. If you want to check out the light build, I'll have details for that in the written guide. It's pretty simple to set up also. Now, as far as jewelry, again, you want to focus on strength as much as you can. And again, heading over to that trader and just searching for the best pieces you can find with strength, that's going to be a great way to go, especially early on. Because strength on jewelry is kind of hard to find. None of the early quests really have that. They tend to have more Constitution as an attribute than strength. So definitely go through the trader and try to pick up something better like this. I get 14 strength. This is a Soldier amulet. Plus the Fortify buff if I get below 50% health, which is pretty cool actually. And then the ring, I've got a soldier ring as well. So it's 13 strength on this. With the leeching trait, so about 1% of my damage done gets returned as health. That's not necessary, but it is nice to have a little extra healing when you're out questing and playing solo. And finally, let's talk about the weapons. So the main weapon being your great axe. It's important to get the best great axe possible as early as possible. And so again, you're going to want that soldier set if you can find it. 16 strength on this one. It's just level 27. If you can get a gem slot, that's going to be really good as well. There's different gems you can run. I do like this opportunist gem for like PvE content. Basically gives you bonus damage when your enemy is below 30% health. So this is really nice for finishing off bosses quickly, cleaving through trash mobs, whatever you need to do. This is a nice gem to use. So that's called the emerald. So you want to pick up an emerald on the trader, or you can also craft that, obviously, if you can do that on your build. And then the trait here is pretty interesting. I was lucky enough to find this. So Insatiable Gravity Well. We are going to be using Gravity Well on this build. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. But you actually gain 35% of your damage back as health, and you cast another Gravity Well. This is like a ridiculously good trait. Traits in New World are pretty hit or miss. Some of them for different weapon skills are completely useless. But this one is pretty cool. I do like it a lot. So if you can find this one, it's called Insatiable Gravity Well. Definitely grab that if you can find it. In terms of the backup weapon being the hatchet, I don't have ideal stats on this one. Ideally, again, you'd want more strength than dexterity, but a little bit of dexterity is not bad because that will increase your hatchet damage as well. No traits or gems on this one yet, so you can obviously do better. I'll have more examples over in the written guide if you want to check that out. Link will be in the description. I think that's it as far as covering gear, so let's jump into the skills next. All right, so let's talk about the Great Axe, which is going to be our main DPS weapon on this build, and it's just so good, you guys. Surprised it hasn't been nerfed yet. Why is it good? Well, it's got a lot of AoE damage. It's extremely easy to use, and it's perfect for things like expeditions where you have tons of enemies clumped up together. If your tank is doing a good job and he's grouping those all together for you, you can get behind that group of enemies and just slash and maul them to death. This build becomes incredibly powerful. So we will be starting in the MAULER tree. I've picked all 3 active skills here. I think they're pretty much the best for group content, though you do have some other options we can talk about. Starting with Maelstrom, this is a AoE spinning attack that deals 110% weapon damage. And this does not do great single target damage, so you'll want to save this for groups of enemies. If you don't have at least 2 to 3 enemies, then I would definitely use your basic attacks instead. Next up, we've got Whirlwind, and this is the key to doing damage with the Great Axe. This thing is insane. 50% weapon damage. You swing your axe in a giant circle, and if you hit the enemy at least once, you'll spin again. So max of 4 spins for the base ability. You can also move around slightly, which is really helpful. You can angle this attack. But note that you cannot backstab with this just because of the nature of the ability, so it doesn't really matter if you're behind an enemy. You can actually start this from the side. And then the final ability we're running here, Gravity Well. Super useful ability for the pull and slow effect that it has on enemies. Basically pulls them into the center of the Gravity Well for 3 seconds. Deals pretty decent burst damage, 125%. And you can cast this at a range, so it's actually a really great way to start a fight. Now let's talk about upgrades a little bit. By far, the best upgrades are for Whirlwind, so I would definitely focus there. Once you get your 3 abilities, 1, 2, and 3, I would go back into Whirlwind and then pick up all of these. So Gusting Winds increases the max number of rotations to 7, so that's almost double damage. You go from 50% weapon damage in 4 spins, that's like 200% weapon damage, to now you have 7 spins, so you're almost double, about 350% weapon damage. From there, get Unending Wind, so you get bonus movement speed. And like I said, you can move while you are doing damage with this ability, which I'll show you in a second. So this is really useful as well. And then this one's even better, 30% bonus damage if you have 3 or more enemies around you. And so that's when you should be conserving this skill. You should only use it if you have 3 or more enemies around you, if possible, because you're going to get all of the damage. So basically 80% times 7 spins, that's like, what, 560% weapon damage out of this one ability. It's really good. So yeah, I would definitely start there with Whirlwind, unlock all those as early as possible. You can hop over to Gravity Well and get some of the upgrades here. Crowded Well is definitely good, so you increase your damage by 10% for each enemy. That can really stack up quickly. And then also this Fortify buff is pretty nice for your group as a utility skill as well. Definitely would get that once you have enough points. I don't like the upgrades as much for Maelstrom specifically as a DPS build. I mean, you can. You just get a greater pull. You basically absorb projectiles. You can get more damage with the last one, but I feel like that's too many upgrades that aren't really useful. So I think I'm just going to skip those for now. As far as passives, there's definitely a few you could pick up along the way. For example, Center of Attention is really good. While holding the Great Axe, you get 10% damage when 3 or more enemies are within 4 meters. So again, going along with the focus of this build, which is the AoE damage and Whirlwind, it's going to buff that by an additional 10%. And of course, the final ability unlocked here, Mauler's Fury, is going to give you increased damage by 3% with a maximum of 10 stacks. So potentially up to 30% bonus damage. That's definitely what I will be going towards. Now, I wouldn't avoid the Reaper tree 100%. There's actually some good passives here. For example, Greed gives your light attacks 5% bonus damage for 5 seconds, and you can stack that up to 3 times. That's really good with just a basic light attack chain to buff up your damage before you go into one of these main skills. Also, critical gains is good. You get bonus healing when you do critical hit. There's some other decent ones as well. Again, I'll have full details on these in the written guide if you want to check that out for more information. Quick demo on the Great Axe. Now I'm approaching a single enemy. I don't want to waste any of my AoE skills, so just simply light or heavy attacking with the Great Axe does tons of damage. Remember that in New World, you don't need to use abilities every few seconds. Your light attacks are extremely powerful. Once we do get closer to a group though, we see this is multiple enemies, so we're going to bring out the Gravity Well. Remember, that has about a 10-meter range, so you can start with that at a distance, letting us go right into Whirlwind for massive AoE damage, a couple more light attacks, and then a quick Maelstrom to finish things off. At that point, you can switch over to your Hatchet if anything is still standing, or you can just continue those easy light attacks. The Hatchet will end up being the secondary weapon on this build, and it's not a bad weapon either. The range is just a little bit shorter, and so this will be more of a single target focused weapon. Definitely good for single bosses though, or when you want to output a lot of focused damage, you're going to switch over to the Hatchet. It's really strong, especially with some of our abilities when they're combined together. And specifically, of course, I'm talking about Berserk. When you trigger this, you do 20% more damage for 12 seconds. Incredibly strong. Then we will have Feral Rush as well. So a sprinting melee attack hits twice. This is great for chasing after enemies or getting into melee range a little bit quicker. And then we have Raging Torrent. This performs 4 fast attacks and up to a 5th attack with our additional upgrades. As you can see, I'm focused pretty much on the Berserker tree for this build. This is where the majority of the damage is going to come from. Once you unlock these abilities, so Berserk, Feral Rush, and then Raging Torrent, I would just go back into Berserk and then start doing these upgrades. So On the Hunt gives you bonus movement speed. Berserking Refresh can give us that heal that we talked about, 30% of our max HP. Every 4 seconds. That's really useful. Berserking Purge can remove some of those status effects. And then finally, Uninterruptible Berserk makes it so we can't be staggered while we have this active, which is really good for doing damage. From there, I would definitely pick up the upgrades for Raging Torrent. So Aggressive Approach gives you a bit of haste. And then especially this one, Final Blow, this gives you the potential for another big damaging strike. So 120% weapon damage on that final light attack, which is really good. So I'm still working on maxing this out, obviously. The upgrades for Feral Rush are decent as well. Dispatch is sort of a bonus damage. If the target's below 30% health, I would definitely get that. And then Crippling Strikes, I think, could be useful for group play. Just having an additional root on your team is probably going to be pretty decent. If you're at this point, you can start thinking about those passives. So Enraged Strikes, again, more bonus damage the lower health your enemy is. That's going to be really nice. Against all odds, increases your damage by 10% for every enemy within 5 meters. It doesn't say there is a cap on this, so this could be potentially really strong if you have, 4, 5, 6 enemies that you're fighting at once. Really good way to boost your damage there. Fortifying Strikes for the extra defense. 3 light attacks is going to give you that Fortify buff, so 15% damage reduction is pretty good. And then finally, you might as well pick up Defy Death. You're going to avoid death, reduce down to 50 HP, and gain immortality for 3 seconds with a 75-second cooldown. That's going to be very, very useful. quick demo on the Hatchet next, first finishing up on the Great Axe with those big, juicy light attacks. We're going to switch back to the Hatchet and then pop Berserk right away. Remember, for the extra 20% bonus damage for the duration. I'm going to use Feral Rush to jump back into combat, remembering to try to get behind the enemy as much as possible. From there, I'm going to go into Raging Torrent, remembering to hit the light attack right at the end of that chain for that additional strike. Maneuvering around the sides, trying to get to the back, continue it with the light attacks, and then you can switch back to Great Axe when it's ready. Now, I did want to add a quick section here on leveling up the build, particularly if you're playing solo without your group. How can you make this work? Well, the weapons themselves are strong. They don't offer a ton of healing potential. And so, especially early on in the game, you might want to think about using a Life Staff. You can pair the Life Staff either with your Great Axe primary weapon, or you can put Hatchet as primary and Life Staff as the secondary. You can mix and match between. Now, the nice thing about the Life Staff is it offers a lot of passive healing over time that can stick to either an enemy or stick to the ground. And if you fight within that circle, you can use your main melee weapon, again, either the Hatchet or the Great Axe while you're leveling it up, and you can get those passive heals coming through the entire time. And you don't even have to level the Life Staff very high. Level 4 or 5 will be plenty to give you tons of extra passive healing. Now, the skills that you want to think about, healing abilities like Sacred Ground, Beacon, maybe Orb of Protection. Again, anything that can heal you passively while you're doing damage, either with your Great Axe or your Hatchet. That's going to make the leveling up process a lot easier, since you'll have a lot of passive healing and you can take on tougher and tougher enemies. I'll have more information on leveling up this build in the written guide. The link is in the description. Make sure to check it out. All right, everybody, and with that said, that's going to wrap up this easy DPS build for New World. If you enjoyed the video today or you found it informative, do us a favor, crush that like button. It's very much appreciated. In the comment section below, let me know what other types of builds you'd like to see for New World. If you have any suggestions, I will definitely check those out. Now, as a reminder, we do have written guides for all of our builds over on the website. That's rpgdojo.com. Tons of other great resources are there for you as well. Make sure to check it out. Link will be down in the description and the pinned comment below. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you around in the next video.